Hi everyone, and thank you very much for coming to the session today. My name is Joanna Gurry and I'm the Executive of Data Platforms at National Australia Bank. Today I'm going to share with you some insights into our data program and our data strategy, some of the achievements and some observations about what's working really well at NAB, and I'm also going to kind of tie in and focus the conversation on an achievement that I am extremely proud of. We managed to turn off a 26-year-old Teradata platform and migrate almost everything that was on it over to Databricks. For context, National Australia Bank, 80 million in market cap. We have 10 million very, very important customers. We're Australia's largest business bank and second largest bank overall, actually. And I'm really proud to be just part of a very large workforce of 38,000 colleagues who are all customer obsessed. So ours is a really large business. We're truly data driven and we have a lot of data to work with. It's a critical resource in every part of our business. As executive of data platforms, my role is to provide all of the data that my colleagues need to give outstanding service for our customers. So at speed, at scale, good security, always on. And we think we should be able to take high quality real-time data for granted and hardly give it a second thought. And we refer to this vision or this kind of aspiration as having data like electricity. And that's why we're working with Databricks. We're transitioning all of our major workflows, all of our major workloads from near real-time data feeds to our decisioning engines through to regulatory reporting and everything in between. And we've made amazing progress on a 3-year program to have all of the core data that we need to service the entire bank on the Lakehouse. And a major milestone in this whole journey was the day that we turned off Teradata. And as many of you probably know, retiring a legacy application is really difficult. It's a strategic decision that significantly impacts your cost and your risk profiles. And in fact, stability and cost and risk was a key driver in why we chose to decommission Teradata. It's often one of the key drivers that compel really large organisations to make these types of strategic decisions. At NAB, our Teradata system had added immense value over the years, and it had its tentacles into many, many business processes, models, reports and extracts, and it really served us very, very well. And in some pockets of the business, you would even say it was beloved. But it was time that we had to do something, because over the years it had become very, very unstable. At least once a week, the database or even the hardware, in fact, had incidents that made the business suffer. It was starting to have a big impact. And it was actually becoming really difficult just to keep the lights on. The performance was lagging compared to business expectations, and the cost had really just increased over the years beyond what we could accept as reasonable. And on top of all of this, it was just so hard to make a change. The system was so fragile that it was really hard to change quickly in response to business demands for new campaigns or new data sources or regulatory needs. So we took the really difficult decision to move the data and use cases off Teradata and shut it down. Not only that, but we also decided to build a brand new data platform that we call ADA using Databricks. And because that wasn't quite enough, we also decided to move from batch processing to data pipelines. And then we also chose, on top of all of that, to take several applications that were built within Teradata and build them back into the core banking and payment systems as well at the same time. We also decided to load 50 data sources at the same time that we were decommissioning Teradata for our fin crime operations team. So we did all of this in the same financial year at the same time. And looking back now, I think it was a bit of a crazy plan. And I can tell you it took blood, sweat and tears to get us across the line. And at the end, all I had left was tears. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it all played out. So this was no small undertaking. We had 18 different data sources, 3,000 attributes flowing in every day, 6 data marts, 956, I think, was the actual total use cases that we started with, 147 different reporting suites across Power BI and Tableau and business objects and a whole ton of other tools, as well as feeds going out to SAS, the SAS grid for use in analytics and other business processes. And we were also running 40 marketing campaigns. And these aren't just marketing campaigns, they're also compliance and communication campaigns in terms of how we service our customers. We had 35 machine learning models, and it looks like on the page that these are kind of just numbers to give you a bit of a flavour of the context, but then they really weren't just numbers. These were absolutely business critical functions and services that needed to keep running smoothly during the entire transition. And one of the most difficult aspects of decommissioning is that any of these old warehouses that you see, they're often still actively used within the organisation, so you can't just shut them down. There's just so many business rules, transformation, and layers of calculations and metrics that you have to rebuild onto the new platform. And the problem in all of this is that in many cases, the people who originally designed and engineered all of these systems have left the organisation, and it's not documented, and no one knows how it all hangs together. I'm seeing a few nods of heads, so you know how difficult that can be. We received some really big surprises along the way. So processes that no one knew about were underpinned by complex transformation rules and extracts that were flowing in, but also out, and sometimes even in a circular way. It was like an episode of Storage Wars. So we decided to target this particular unit. We made the financial commitment. We had the whole bank behind us, finally agreeing that the time was nigh. And we walked up to the roller door and lifted it up, and that's when the real work began, and we started finding out exactly what was inside. Now, the good news is that there were many Databricks capabilities that were absolutely fit for purpose, out of the box, configurable and ready to turn on for use in migrating these workloads. So we used Autoloader for ingestion, DB SQL pipelines for our transformations. We built the new platform using the medallion architecture, so bronze, silver and gold layers for structuring our data flows. And we also used Unity Catalog for managing all of our metadata, and that's what drove our pipeline code, data classification, data governance and user access controls. We were able to use Power BI integration for our reports and ML flow for our machine learning models. And as we started taking stock of all of these use cases, we discovered that the data and the different data marts in Teradata were actually hosting like really business critical processes, and applications had been built inside the database that we didn't know about. So we had payments and lending processes that instead of running in our core banking systems were running in our data and analytics platform in Teradata. So we found things like cashback payments for paying customers incentives to take up new mortgages, and also Apple Pay were running out of Teradata. And there were also really high impact services that were so important to our customers that we had to protect and be very, very careful with. So services supporting our customers in financial distress or financial hardship, as well as bereavement support, fraud detection, and there were some regulatory reports running off it as well. So this was all very tightly coupled with all of these business rules that we were leveraging, but we were able to leverage asset bundles and workflow to carefully design all of these dependencies. And in doing so, we managed to break up quarterly releases into weekly releases, and in fact we now do daily releases. Generally we aim for weekly releases, but we're able to do releases onto Databricks any day of the week. And we've introduced that breakup with a technique we called microflows. In all of this, of course, we had to bring 1,200 users along with us. We had to train them and enable them to work effectively on our data intelligence platform. And we did this by establishing a data and analytics guild and working with our Databricks Academy partners to get people trained and certified. Now, a really risky part of the whole decommissioning was we had to work out how to untangle these thousands of jobs flowing into Teradata from the enterprise batch. And at NAB, the enterprise batch runs on Control M. And a few of you will recognise how difficult that is to work with enterprise teams when things aren't generally being changed on a regular basis, so you don't have an operational knowledge of this. But we did work out that we could remain in the batch and get the central team to just toggle off our jobs. So the code was there, but we just took them out of the schedule. And that way, if something went wrong, we could just turn them back on again and let the data catch up. So that was kind of handy. For every upstream source flowing into Databricks, we needed to build all of the alerts and monitoring to manage the operations. So we put in operational dashboards over every load. Also, all of our silver integration jobs at our table level, we had to build triggers and alerts for, and against all of our gold facts and dimensions that were going to serve the data up to the users as well. And this observability is just so important. It's a huge enabler for us. It's something that we have not had available to us in some of our other legacy data warehouses and data lakes. So that's a real game changer for us, is having that observability. It's really important if you want to build a reliable data source that the business is going to be depending on. And in fact, in the last couple of months, we've started publishing our operational dashboards onto the bank's intranet. And we've had a few brown bags, people, like 150 people turning up for these webinars where people are interested in finding out the operational dashboards, how they work and how to access them, so that they can go in and self-serve exactly when the pipeline that they're interested in has finished running and if there's any hold-ups. And it's a huge enabler for our team as well. If anything goes wrong during the day or overnight, or there's an upstream feed that hasn't come in, it means that we can proactively take action before our users have to notify us that something looks wrong. So that has been a great win. Of course, we had to get the data out again as well, not just to reports, but to downstream processes such as our financial crime operations. And we have other platforms such as Redshift and Snowflake that we're decommissioning, but in fact, when we did this, they were still in place. So we leveraged FileServe to do that, and we're also turning on APIs soon while we start the next phase of that decommissioning for those other platforms. And in all of this, our goal was to 100% fully exit the data centre. So switching off all the hardware, removing it from the data centre. We had to archive the data, power down the infrastructure, and then actually lift and shift the physical hardware from the premises to make sure that that was all, we arranged for its destruction. So to take that enormous step and actually get out of the data centre and pull the power out, we had to have huge confidence in basic operational resiliency. And of course, the Databricks platform, it is super stable. It is extremely rare for us to have any downtime. It's hugely resilient. It means the focus could be on everything that is not within the Databricks platform's control. We focused on the incoming feeds from all of the systems upstream, and also all of the accuracy of the business rules that we applied. So that was one big thing we didn't have to worry about when making that decision. I'm going to talk about a couple of options. When you're going about turning something off, you always think, well, exactly how are we going to do this? Turning it off, it might seem straightforward, but I can guarantee you that any system that you're running and you're planning to shut off is probably used by someone in your organisation. So doing that without proper planning can create significant disruption. However, you might not be able to turn the whole thing off all at once, but it's highly likely that there's a lot of stuff in there that is just not used anymore, that no one knows about, and it's just been running in the background and no one's checked. So if you can invest the time in finding out where those pockets of waste and redundancy are, you can generally turn things off without having much of a noticeable business impact. And I'll tell you how we went about doing that. You could do a lift and shift strategy. Some people call that rehosting, and that really means you're not changing much, you're just putting it into the cloud. Because we were moving from big batch files and an on-prem system into the cloud, but we were also moving to data pipelines. That wasn't really an option for us. I think if you do that, there's huge benefits to the business because they don't have to learn anything new, and it makes things a little bit more simple. However, the huge trade-off that you're making is that you're just rebuilding what you have had in the past. You're not building something new to enable all of the different stuff that the business is going to want, like Gen AI and real-time streaming and machine learning or lightweight API architectures as well. So I think there's a massive trade-off in taking that approach anyway. When it comes down to rebuilding the use cases on the Lakehouse, this was our primary approach. So we started at the very end of the chain, looking at the reports and extracting queries that the business already had in place. But we took a very disciplined approach to how we were going to do the hard work right up front. And instead of constraining ourselves in terms of scope to just the fields that we already had on Teradata from all of these source systems, we actually took a fresh look at what was available in each of these sources. So we worked with the application teams to understand how much more data they had available that we could bring into Databricks. And this was tough. Some teams didn't even have a data dictionary. They didn't even know they didn't have a metadata repository. They didn't even know what was in their own databases. So every load was kind of like a project in itself. And we built new extracts using Fivetrans HVR product wherever we could. And this was moving from batch files to streaming using change data capture patterns. And we took the view that we'd take all of the business relevant data that was likely to be valuable for all of the use cases we could envisage for the future, not just the ones that we were migrating over from Teradata. We also had to build our target state logical model in Silver, and this meant that we had to pick what was the target going to be. We wanted to make it sort of not future-proof, but malleable enough and standardised enough that we could ingest more and more sources after we'd finished with Teradata. And in fact, we're up to 140 sources now, coming in during the day, overnight, 24/7, beyond that initial 18 that we loaded for Teradata. And I think the good choice that we made was we chose an industry standard reference model for financial services, the one that there's a few around, and the one that we picked was from IBM. And in doing that, we also took the time to really carefully classify all of the incoming data column by column, and we made sure that these were defined and available in Unity Catalog, so we could drive data governance and user access controls. And now we have data lineage across the entire platform. And this approach had never been done before. And the tools were all new to us. And we were actually building the platform while we were conducting all of this work as well. So it was very exciting, but it was extremely difficult. We're learning on the fly and having to keep up the pace to make the program timelines. The benefits of taking the time to do all of this hard work up front, it is game-changing. We've built the first enterprise metadata repository, and that means that we've enabled the measurement of data quality in all of our 140 sources coming in by using our bronze layer as a proxy. So we have data quality rules running every day, published on dashboards according to the rules that we apply for our critical data elements. And we now use that in reporting to our regulator, our banking regulator in Australia, on the health and the quality of the data in all of our customer and business transaction payments systems, everything that is critical. And that's just something that I've actually never seen happen before. So all of that investment up front has really been worth it. In addition to that, sensitive data is automatically masked according to its classification in Unity Catalog, and it's accessible by only those people that really need to see it in plain text. So this is undoubtedly the most difficult approach of the four. I am just so glad we did it. However, it's got the most long-term benefits, and I think it's the best way to achieve a truly transformational impact, not just a decommissioning and migration. Hollowing out, we did a little bit of this. This approach is a little bit nuanced. So at NAB, we had significant dependencies on a second data warehouse that was on Exadata, and it had data coming into and out of Teradata. And so what we had to decide to do was what we're going to do about that, because we didn't have time to decommission that system as well. So what we did was we took copies of the most critical tables that we needed, and we put those into Databricks as a source. And it's an interim phase and it's temporary. So as we're loading all of the data from scratch from the source systems into Databricks, as we build up, towards that 140 and beyond, we're turning off the feeds into those tables, and that means we're hollowing out, that source of data from the inside as we go. You need to be really disciplined to continue to do the hard work around that though. And we're still not finished. After the Teradata decommissioning, we're still load by load as we're ingesting more data. We're still in the process of turning that off. So a couple of the lessons that we learned. In doing a really large-scale migration like this, there's tremendous pressure from the business to absolutely rebuild 100% and migrate everything over. And the business is going to insist that every report, every model, every data pipeline must be preserved. And you can't leave anything behind just in case. But I'm here to tell you that this approach is really the most effective use of your time and resources. One of the things that we did, which I thought was really valuable, was identifying what's actually being used and trying to decrease the scope. Has anyone moved house recently within memory? Yes? Well, I don't know about you, but the last time I moved house, I couldn't believe how much stuff we had that hadn't seen the light of day for years. There ended up being a huge amount in the curbside bin, and in the skip that we hired because, with streaming and subscriptions, we didn't need the 1,000 DVDs and CDs and all of those cords and all of those devices that go with that because technology has moved on. And I think similarly, we looked at how the data technology had changed since 26 years ago when we first implemented batch schedules and copying data from place to place and producing extracts all the time. And we were determined that that wouldn't hold us back. We moved to CDC, we've taken up real time, and we have a zero copy architecture. So we don't make copies of data between the layers. It's all logical and we keep copying data to an absolute minimum. And it's not just the tech though. The big thing in moving house is realising how much our actual family had changed, so our requirements had changed. We had really different needs from when we were travelling internationally, doing snow sports, raising babies, all of that kind of stuff. We had moved on. And so we just didn't, although we needed more room, we didn't need all the paraphernalia that goes with that. And it's the same type of parallel when you're trying to narrow your scope with the business. We looked at how much our NAB family had changed in 26 years, and we defined the scope not as a like-for-like build, but only what we needed now, even though we need to create room for the future. And there was a lot of pushback. Really difficult to keep the relationships intact when you're trying to get the business to let go of stuff, and they are worried because they often don't know very confidently what is needed. So they want to hang on to everything so that we don't make a mistake. But what we did was we asked lots of probing questions. So if someone said, well, we still need that report, we said, great, show us the last time you used it and we'll add it to the register. And people just didn't come back. They couldn't find anyone that had been using it. When we heard, the regulator asked questions about that data and we need to have it ready back, going back 20 years. And we said, okay, that's fantastic. Show us the last time the regulator asked for the data so that we can determine what tables are involved. The regulators never asked for the data. I think just asking those, probing questions, just simple follow-up questions had a massive impact. And we didn't really just rely on business input either. We actually went to the system. We checked out logs, we dove into hit rates, we examined usage patterns, and out of thousands of reports, hundreds of use cases, we could actually see within the system itself what was being used. Using this approach, we reduced our use cases from 956 down to just over 400, which was a huge saving. In terms of when the business is really struggling to identify what they need, we also use the approach of asking, well, who's going to test this? Who's going to do the user acceptance testing? Who's going to sign off that the results are correct? And we started locking in weeks and months worth of individual people's names where they would test things. And that's where it was quite a revelation. The things that were really important, everyone wanted to test and everyone wanted to own and everyone wanted to make sure that the numbers were correct. And then there were vast swathes of stuff that we couldn't find anyone who was interested in testing it at all. So I think that's a really good indicator for how to reduce your scope as well. The other thing we did was we created a really comprehensive archive. So to provide reassurance for the stakeholders who are really worried about losing historical data, We backed up everything, so not just the data, but the schema and the models, report definitions, example outputs, SQL queries, metadata, HTML code, you name it. And the archive, we compressed it and we put it into cold storage with one of our cloud providers. And this provided a safety net for the program, but also as like a security blanket for the business as well. And in fact, the archive is not really used. And because it's in cold storage in the cloud, it's an economical way of still hanging on to that just in case something was needed one day. But again, no one's really using it, so we'll look to retire that at the right point. In terms of designing for the future, this, a huge obstacle was overcoming the mindset of building like for like. Apart from the, cutting down all of those use cases, we also were expected to rebuild these Apple, like cash incentives and Apple Pay incentive kind of applications and different things for Treasury and Finance back into Databricks. Because they had been in Teradata, everyone was expecting us to rebuild that in Databricks. However, automatically rebuilding these on a data and analytics platform, we stepped back and said, look, if we were building this application from scratch, would any of the architects say, well, the first thing you need to do is build a data intelligence platform? And of course, the answer is no. So we worked really closely with the enterprise architects and all of the application teams that run our core banking systems. And we had them rebuild those applications for us back in the core systems where they belonged. It had to all be done by the time that we were due to exit Teradata, but we had wonderful executive support, which made all of those conversations a lot easier. And in fact, the teams that run those business systems, they were really glad to have that functionality back where it belonged in their domain so that they were controlling the end-to-end. A major platform migration presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So the team that implemented our Teradata system 26 years ago, they would never have imagined that it would still be around more than a quarter of a century later, and had, produced all of that business value over the years. But looking towards Databricks, we've just got such an extraordinarily rich and powerful set of capabilities right at our fingertips. So the danger in approaching all of this new technology with an old mindset is that you're just going to recreate all of your legacy, and you're going to miss the transformative potential of what these modern data platforms can offer. The other thing that we did in terms of designing for the future is hyper-standardisation. We had a guiding principle that meant we used as much as we could out of the box. We configured things rather than writing customised code. And it meant no special pipelines just for one use case, no special data models just for one report, no copies of data just because that's the way we used to do it. And again, we adopted the industry standard normalised models for integration in our silver layer. And this approach really offers a lot of benefits. So new team members coming into the data modelling team or the information architecture arena, they can understand that standardised model really quickly without having to lean on years and years of accumulated knowledge and organisational memory. It reduces key dependencies when people leave because you have other commodity resources within the market that are familiar with that standard model. And more importantly, it makes sure that any new data source that we want to introduce, it can be introduced seamlessly and integrated into these single view tables that we have in Silver without producing spurious results because it's a normalised model. I can't overstate how difficult this was to implement. Our data modelling experts many of them had just spent their entire careers working on this 26-year-old Teradata system, and that they didn't know that the methods that they used to do data modelling was just one choice, that there were other ways of doing it. And this is where strong leadership became really crucial. When teams push back and they just want to revert to their familiar methods, you really need leaders who can lean in a technical way and take action and correct course. And sometimes, and especially in our case, that meant we had to make some really difficult personnel choices as well. And if I could do one thing differently, I would have better anticipated the magnitude of this challenge because I really underestimated how difficult it would be for the modelling team to feel comfortable with making that massive change. In terms of the technical choices that positioned us for future growth as well, I've said that we implemented asset bundles, and that allowed the business teams to manage their own CI/CD releases for machine learning. It gives them greater control over what goes into production. They don't need to engage the technology team to make changes to variables or weightings or other things within their machine learning models, which is fantastic. And with streaming data, we've implemented Delta Live tables to achieve low latency, super fresh data into the business. And of course, everything's integrated into Unity Catalog. And as I've said, that's a game changer. And I guess the thing that's really stood out to me that I have learnt, and I would repeat again, which was a great lesson, is honouring past value. So we avoided the term legacy, and we described the Teradata system and the teams as heritage. Now, this might seem like a really tiny and small semantic difference, but it signals something really important about how much you value their IP and how much you really value their institutional knowledge regarding that system that you're decommissioning. It demonstrated respect for the people that contributed to that asset over the years, and they're the people that you're relying on, not to rebuild a like-for-like technology platform, but to help with the business rules and the relationships with the business as well. And for people who worked on something that they loved and felt deeply connected to, it was almost part of their identity. When we said that we were going to shut it down, it was profoundly disorienting to a few of them. And it kind of stung a bit. It was like their work life had kind of tilted on its axis a little bit. So we gave them a high-profile role in the transition and made sure that they had a unique experience in building the new platform. And actually, when we finally shut down Teradata, we marked the occasion by bringing a film crew into the data centre, and we live streamed the shutdown of the hardware and the powering down to the entire company. So hundreds of people tuned in to watch the program director and one of the analysts that had been there for 26 years and working on this system. They were in the data centre with the film crew and were instructing the technician cabinet by cabinet to turn it off. And we all watched the blinking eyes fade to black and the power go out. And it was a very moving experience. I might have been exhausted, but it was actually phenomenal to watch that. And we had thousands of views of that live stream that we published later as well. Communicating and investing in change, this was a big one too. We didn't do this as well as we could have, even though we tried really hard. We used multiple channels, emails, brown bags, formal steering committees, learning sessions, you name it, we did it, but it still wasn't quite sufficient. By the end of the migration, we had about 95% of the use cases had been successfully ported over, and they were running faster, better quality data, amazing outcomes, great opportunities for the business to be leveraging all of this stuff in entirely new ways. But there were about 5% of the use cases where the business rules they proved extraordinarily difficult to recreate. So although they looked correct on the reports or some of the queries that the business analysts were recreating, when the analysts in the business tried to reuse that data to produce new metrics or new reports, they were getting incorrect answers. And of course, some of these rules have been operating for years and years, turned out to be flawed in the first place and not as accurate as the business had understood them. But some of them were just defects. Even after we had decommissioned the system, we had to do quite a bit of refactoring for about 2 or 3 months. So if I had to do something again differently, I would actually carve that time out and have many, many checkpoints scooping up objections or queries and spend a lot more time embedding that change back into the business areas. And in fact, one of the things that we noticed was we were getting complaints about reports running really slowly in Databricks. Some of our Power BI reports were taking 3 or 4 minutes to render. However, when our platform engineers looked at them, we got them down to, a couple of seconds, like under 5 seconds. And these are things that are combining tables of upwards of 82 billion rows and doing outer joins with other 100 billion row tables, and they're running in under seconds. So I think one of the things, it's a remarkable improvement to be able to turn that around for the business and build confidence in the performance, but it demonstrates the importance of understanding how your downstream consumers are going to have to adjust their understanding of how to optimise for a brand new platform. So in conclusion, as we are continuing our journey with Databricks, we're discovering lots and lots of new possibilities. This is the scale of what we're dealing with now. We've got just so many more assets on the platform. We've got all of these meta stores, huge number of ingestion tasks, lots of schemas, and we're driving critical business use cases beyond that Teradata migration. Our customer brain, which is a personalised decisioning engine, credit risk, fraud detection, a ton of other stuff, and we're still managing to keep it. I think we're actually up to 1.2 petabytes now, but we're still managing to keep it relatively small because we're using a zero-copy architecture and we're using change data capture, not whole great big files anymore. So our teams are developing new skills, data scientists tackling new problems, and I guess the transformation for me has really pointed out it's not just a matter of moving data and tech from one platform to another. It's about reimagining what data is going to be doing in the future for your organisation. It's about building for tomorrow's needs, not just rebuilding the past. And I know I said that in the end all I had left was tears, but a few of them were tears of joy that it was over. And also deep pride in what we had done as a team. The Databricks team and the NAB team side by side in a really, really strong partnership. And that's what got us over the line. So thank you for your time today. And if any of you are also undertaking a dusting off the Cobwebs program, I wish you all the best of luck.